A mix-up at a posh French restaurant leads Monica, a diner waitress and aspiring writer, to meet billionaire Ethan Grayson. As sparks fly, their worlds collide, exposing secrets, rivalries, and a love story that defies class and expectation. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Monica Ellis wiped down another table at Joe's Diner, her feet aching after another long shift. At 28, she'd spent 10 years serving coffee and burgers while dreaming of becoming a writer. Her notebook, filled with stories she wrote during breaks, was tucked safely in her bag behind the counter. "Monica, honey, you got another letter," said Betty, the older waitress who'd been like a mother to her since she started working at the diner. She handed Monica a thin envelope from a publishing company. Monica's heart sank as she read the rejection letter, her third this month. "Maybe I should just give up," she sighed, slumping onto a bar stool. "Absolutely not," said Jenny, her best friend since high school, who'd stopped by for her usual afternoon coffee. "And that's exactly why I signed you up for that dating app. You need to get out more, meet new people, live a little." "Jenny, I told you I don't have time for dating," Monica protested. But Jenny was already showing her the profile of a guy she'd matched her with. "His name's David, he's a teacher, and he's totally your type. I already set up the date for Friday night at La Maison." Monica's eyes widened. "La Maison? That fancy French place downtown? I can't afford that." "He's paying, obviously." Jenny rolled her eyes. "Come on, Monica. When's the last time you went on a real date?" Monica thought about her lonely apartment, the stack of rejection letters, and her dwindling bank account. "Fine," she finally agreed, "but if this turns out terrible, I'm never letting you set me up again." Friday night came faster than Monica expected. She stood outside La Maison in her nicest dress, the blue one she'd bought on clearance last year, feeling completely out of place among the expensive cars pulling up to the valet. Her hands shook as she walked inside. The hostess looked her up and down with barely concealed judgment. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone," Monica said, scanning the dining room. She spotted a man sitting alone at a corner table and, relieved to see someone who might be her date, headed straight for him. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Traffic was terrible, and then I couldn't find parking, and—" She stopped talking when she noticed how the man was looking at her. He was older than the profile picture. Jenny had shown her maybe mid-30s and wearing what had to be $1,000 suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his grey eyes studied her with curiosity. "I don't think," he started to say, but Monica cut him off, her nerves making her ramble. I know. I'm not what you expected. Jenny probably used an old picture on my profile. I told her not to, but she never listens. I'm Monica, by the way. And I should warn you, I've never been to a place this fancy before. I don't even know what half these menu items are." A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm Ethan," he said, seemingly amused by her nervous chatter. "Ethan Grayson." "Like the tech company?" Monica asked without thinking. Everyone knew about Grayson Technologies. It was one of the biggest companies in the city. "Exactly like that," he said, his smile growing wider. Before Monica could process what that meant, a waiter appeared at her elbow. "Miss, there's a gentleman at the bar asking for Monica Ellis." Monica's face went red as realization dawned. She looked at Ethan in horror. "Oh my God, you're not David." "No," Ethan said, still smiling. "I'm not." "I am so sorry," Monica stammered, grabbing her purse and nearly knocking over her water glass in her hurry to stand up. "I should go find my actual date. I can't believe I just sat down at a stranger's table and started talking about my friend Jenny and parking problems and—" "Stay," Ethan said, surprising them both. "Please." Monica froze halfway out of her chair. "What?" "I was supposed to have a business dinner, but my appointment cancelled at the last minute. And honestly, this is the most interesting conversation I've had in months." His eyes met hers, and there was something warm and genuine in them that made Monica's heart skip a beat. "I'm not who you were looking for, but I'd like to be." Monica slowly sat back down, hardly believing what was happening. "Are you sure? I mean, I just crashed your table and made a complete fool of myself." "You made my night infinitely more interesting," Ethan corrected. He signaled the waiter. Would you let the gentleman at the bar know that Miss Ellis won't be joining him this evening? As the waiter walked away, Monica should have felt guilty about standing up her blind date. Instead, looking at Ethan's kind smile and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed at her jokes, she had the strangest feeling that she'd accidentally sat down at exactly the right table. "So," Ethan said, opening his menu, "should I help you decode these French dishes?" For the first time that evening, Monica felt herself truly relax. "Please do. And while you're at it, you can tell me how someone ends up eating alone at a fancy French restaurant on a Friday night." The candlelight caught the spark of interest in Ethan's eyes as he leaned forward to begin his story. Outside the restaurant, windows. The city lights twinkled like stars, and neither of them noticed the hours slipping by as they talked and laughed, both aware that something unexpected and wonderful was beginning. Betty would never believe this story when Monica told her about it during tomorrow's shift at the diner. But then again, the best stories often start with a simple mistake, like sitting at the wrong table on the right night. A week after their chance meeting at La Maison, Monica still couldn't believe she was dating Ethan Grayson. She stood in front of Joe's diner, watching his sleek black Mercedes pull up to the curb. Several customers pressed their faces against the windows, amazed to see such an expensive car in their neighborhood. "You really didn't have to pick me up from work," Monica said, feeling self-conscious in her waitress uniform as she slipped into the passenger seat. "I wanted to see where you work," Ethan smiled, but Monica noticed his eyes taking in the rundown, buildings and flickering neon signs of her neighborhood. "Though I wish you'd let me send my driver instead of working double shifts." "Ethan, we talked about this," Monica sighed. "I need to pay my own bills. I'm not going to become one of those women who depends on a rich boyfriend." The word boyfriend still felt strange on her tongue. After their first date, Ethan had called her every day and they'd spent most evenings together. But Monica couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a dream that could pop like a bubble at any moment. "At least let me take you shopping for the charity gala this weekend," Ethan said as they drove toward his penthouse. "The press will be there, and you don't want me showing up in something from the clearance rack," Monica finished, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. Ethan reached for her hand. "That's not what I meant. I just want you to feel comfortable. These events can be intense." Monica thought about the society pages she'd seen, filled with pictures of Ethan at fancy parties with beautiful, wealthy women. Women nothing like her. "Maybe I shouldn't go." "Monica," Ethan pulled the car over and turned to face her. "I want you there. I want everyone to meet the woman who crashed my business dinner and made me laugh for the first time in years. Even though I'm just a waitress?" "You're not just anything," Ethan said firmly. "You're a writer with more talent in one page than most published authors. You're the kindest person I've ever met. And you're the only woman I want on my arm at that gala." Monica felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'm scared, Ethan. Your world is so different from mine. Yesterday, your sister called to invite me to lunch at her country club, and I had to Google what a country club was. Victoria can be difficult," Ethan admitted, "but she'll come around. They all will, once they get to know you like I do." Before Monica could respond, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at it and frowned. "I have to take this business emergency." He answered the call, immediately switching into what Monica thought of as his CEO voice, confident, commanding, and nothing like the gentle way he spoke to her. While he talked about stock options and board meetings, Monica stared out the window at the changing neighborhood. They'd left behind her world of small diners and discount stores, entering the realm of boutique shops and luxury high-rises where Ethan lived. "Sorry about that," Ethan said, ending the call. "Where were we?" "You were trying to convince me that a waitress from the wrong side of town could fit into your world of galas and country clubs." "Stop that," Ethan said, but his phone buzzed again with another message. "Just give it time, everything will work out." But later that night, as Monica lay in her small apartment with its leaking faucet and noisy radiator, she wondered if anything could bridge the gap between their worlds. She pulled out her notebook and began to write, pouring her fears onto the page. Once upon a time, a girl met a prince, but unlike the fairy tales, She knew that happy endings weren't guaranteed, especially when the prince lived in a penthouse and the girl could barely make rent. Her phone lit up with a text from Ethan. "Missing you already. Can't wait to show you off at the gala. Sweet dreams, beautiful." Monica hugged the phone to her chest, torn between joy and fear. She was falling hard for Ethan Grayson, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their story was headed for heartbreak. After all, real life wasn't like the romance novels she loved to write, and in the real world, princesses didn't come from diners in bad neighborhoods. Little did Monica know, across town in his luxury penthouse, Ethan was having his own doubts. Not about Monica. She was the most real thing in his life of corporate fakery and social obligations. No, he was worried about the wolves circling her, waiting to tear apart anyone they deemed unworthy of the Grayson name. His sister Victoria had already started making calls, digging into Monica's background. Ethan poured himself a drink and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in his life, he had found someone who saw him as more than his bank account, someone who made him laugh, who challenged him, who didn't care about his status or his money. He wouldn't let anyone take that away from him. Not his sister, not the press, not the whole damn society crowd. Monica Ellis had walked into the wrong restaurant, but straight into his heart, and he was going to make sure she stayed there, even if it meant turning both their worlds upside down. The night of the charity gala arrived too quickly. Monica stood in front of the mirror, in a designer dress that cost more than 6 months of her rent. The midnight blue silk made her feel like a princess, but her stomach was in knots. "You look beautiful," Ethan said, appearing in the doorway of his penthouse guest room where she'd been getting ready. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, every inch the billionaire CEO. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up," Monica admitted, fidgeting with the diamond earrings he'd insisted on lending her. "What if I use the wrong fork or say something stupid?" "Just be yourself," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her waist. "That's who I fell for." The moment they walked into the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, Monica felt every eye turn toward them. The whispers started immediately. "Isn't that the waitress? I heard she trapped him. What is Ethan thinking?" Victoria Grayson, Ethan's elegant sister, swooped in immediately. "Darling brother," she air-kissed his cheek before turning a cold smile to Monica. "And, Monica, that's a lovely dress. Wasn't it in last season's collection?" Monica's cheeks burned. The dress had been this season's and incredibly expensive, but trust Victoria to find a way to make her feel small. "Monica, dear," Victoria continued sweetly, "I must introduce you to Caroline Sheffield. She and Ethan practically grew up together. They were quite the item in college. Caroline was everything Monica wasn't, tall, blonde, and dripping in old money." "Ethan," she purred, placing a manicured hand on his arm, "you've been hiding from us lately." "I've been busy," Ethan said stiffly, trying to steer Monica away. "Yes, we've heard." Caroline's eyes raked over Monica. "How quaint that you've been spending time in diners. Though I suppose it's good to remember how the other half lives." Monica felt like she'd been slapped. She'd been naive to think she could fit into this world. "Excuse me," she mumbled, hurrying toward the ladies' room. She could hear Ethan calling after her, but she needed air. In the elegant bathroom, Monica gripped the marble counter and tried not to cry. The door opened, and she heard 2 women enter. "Can you believe Ethan brought her?" one said, not realizing Monica was there. "A waitress. Patricia says she writes silly little romance stories too. How embarrassing." "Well, you know how it is," the other replied. "Men like Ethan sometimes need to experiment before settling down with someone suitable. Remember his phase with that yoga instructor?" Monica's heart shattered. Was that all she was to Ethan? An experiment? A phase? She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and called Jenny. "Come get me," she whispered. "Please." "What happened?" Jenny asked, instantly alert. "You were right, I don't belong here. I'll text you the address." Monica slipped out of the bathroom and headed for the exit, ignoring the curious stares. She almost made it to the door when she heard Ethan's voice. "Monica, wait!" She turned to find him rushing after her, looking worried. The ballroom had gone quiet, everyone watching their drama unfold. "I can't do this, Ethan," Monica said, tears finally spilling over. I can't be who they want me to be. I can't compete with women like Caroline. I don't want you to compete with anyone, Ethan said, reaching for her hand. I want you to be you. The you who uses the wrong fork, Monica asked bitterly. The you who doesn't know what a country club is? The you who serves coffee for a living? The you who makes me laugh, Ethan countered. The you who sees me as more than my bank account. The you who writes stories that make people believe in love. Victoria appeared beside them, hissing, Ethan, you're making a scene. Good, Ethan said loudly, not taking his eyes off Monica. Let them watch. Let them see that I don't care what any of them think. But I care, Monica whispered. I care that your sister hates me. I care that your friends mock me behind my back. I care that everyone in this room thinks I'm not good enough for you. Then they're all idiots, Ethan declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. Because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Victoria looked like she might faint, but before Monica could respond, an older woman pushed through the crowd. Eleanor Grayson, Ethan's mother, stood before them in all her regal glory. Well, she said, looking Monica up and down, this is certainly more entertaining than our usual galas. The room held its breath, waiting for the family matriarch's verdict. Eleanor's approval or disapproval could make or break Monica's future with Ethan. And in that moment, as Monica faced the woman who could destroy her chance at happiness, she realized that sometimes love meant fighting for what you wanted, even if you had to fight in a borrowed dress and borrowed jewels. Eleanor Grayson took a slow sip of her champagne, her steel-grey eyes never leaving Monica's face. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Tell me, dear, Eleanor said finally, what exactly are your intentions with my son? Monica felt her throat go dry. Victoria was smirking, clearly expecting her to crumble under Eleanor's intimidating presence. But something inside Monica snapped. She was tired of feeling ashamed of who she was. My intentions? Monica's voice came out stronger than she expected. I love your son, Mrs. Grayson. Not his money, not his company, not his social position. I love how his eyes crinkle when he really smiles. I love how he always tips Betty extra at the diner, because she reminds him of his first nanny. I love that he pretends to like my terrible coffee just because I made it. Ethan squeezed her hand, but Monica wasn't finished. I know I don't belong in this world. I know my dress is borrowed and I picked up the wrong fork at dinner. But I belong with Ethan. And if that's not good enough for you or your family or this crowd, then that's your loss, not mine. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, to everyone's shock, Eleanor Grayson began to laugh. Well, she said, eyes twinkling, that's certainly more backbone than the last few women who tried to join this family. She turned to her daughter. Victoria, dear, do close your mouth. You look like a fish. Victoria sputtered. Mother, you can't possibly what? Eleanor raised an elegant eyebrow. Approve of someone who actually loves my son instead of his bank account? She stepped closer to Monica. You know, I was a receptionist when I met Ethan's father. Everyone said I wasn't good enough for Richard Grayson either. Monica stared at her in disbelief. You were? Oh, yes, Eleanor smiled. Victoria likes to pretend she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, but she seems to have forgotten where she came from. She linked her arm through Monica's. Now, dear, why don't you join me for a drink? I'd love to hear more about this diner where my son's been hiding away. As Eleanor led her toward the bar, Monica caught glimpses of shocked faces in the crowd. Caroline looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Victoria was having what appeared to be a silent meltdown. Mother, Victoria hissed, following them. What will people say? They'll say exactly what they said about me 35 years ago, Eleanor replied calmly. And they'll be just as wrong now as they were then. She patted the seat next to her at the bar. Monica, dear, has Ethan told you about the time he tried to run away to join the circus? For the next hour, Eleanor shared embarrassing stories about Ethan's childhood while he groaned and tried to stop her. Monica found herself relaxing, laughing at tales of little Ethan's attempts to train the family cat to be his business partner. He was always different from the other society children, Eleanor said fondly. More interested in building computers, here in the garage than learning polo. It used to drive Victoria crazy that he wouldn't play her social games. It still does, Ethan smiled, wrapping an arm around Monica's waist. But their moment of peace was interrupted by James Bradford, head of the charity board and one of Grayson Technologies' biggest investors. "Ethan," he said gravely. "A word?" His eyes flickered disapprovingly to Monica. In private, Ethan's jaw tightened. "Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Monica." Bradford's face darkened. "Very well, the board is concerned about your recent behavior. Your choice in company reflects on all of us. There are rumors about your commitment to the company's image." "Are you threatening me, James?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Simply offering friendly advice," Bradford replied smoothly. "It would be a shame if certain board members began questioning your judgment. After all, a CEO's personal life can affect stock prices." Before Ethan could respond, Eleanor stood up. "James, darling," she said in a voice that could freeze hell, "do you remember what happened to the last board member who tried to interfere in my family's personal life?" Bradford paled slightly. "Eleanor, He tried to force Richard to break up with a certain receptionist," Eleanor continued pleasantly. 3 months later, he was working as a mall security guard in New Jersey. Fascinating how quickly fortunes can change, isn't it? Bradford retreated so quickly he almost tripped over his own feet. "Thank you," Monica said softly to Eleanor. "Don't thank me yet, dear," Eleanor sighed. "That was just the beginning. There will be more Bradfords, more Victorias, more people trying to tear you down." She looked Monica in the eye. "The question is, are you ready for that fight?" Monica looked at Ethan, who was watching her with so much love it made her heart ache. She thought about walking away, going back to her simple life at the diner. It would be easier. But then Ethan smiled, that real smile that made his eyes crinkle, and Monica knew her answer. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Good. Now about those stories you write." She smiled wickedly. "Ethan tells me you're quite talented. I happen to know several publishers who owe me favors." As Eleanor began plotting Monica's writing career with the same intensity she used to run charity boards, Monica felt Ethan's arms wrap around her from behind. "Still want to run away?" he whispered in her ear. Monica leaned back against him, watching Eleanor take out her phone and start making calls. "Not a chance. I think your mother just adopted me." "Lucky me," Ethan chuckled. "But you know this means you're stuck with all of us now, crazy family included." Monica turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "I can handle crazy. It's having to return this dress tomorrow that I'm worried about." "About that," Ethan grinned. "Mother insisted on buying it for you. Something about not letting her future daughter-in-law wear borrowed clothes." Monica's heart skipped a beat. Future what? But Ethan just winked and led her back to the dance floor, leaving Monica to wonder if she'd heard him correctly. Behind them, Eleanor was already announcing to anyone who would listen that her son had finally found someone worthy of the Grayson name, even if she did occasionally use the wrong fork. Victoria Grayson had never handled losing well. She sat in her corner office at Grayson Technologies, manicured nails drumming against her desk as she watched the latest society page coverage of her brother and that waitress. Monica Ellis continues. "Cinderella story with tech billionaire," the headline read, showing a picture of Monica and Ethan at a local bookstore opening. Eleanor stood beside them, beaming with pride. Victoria's lips curled into a cold smile as her assistant entered the room. "Did you find anything?" "Yes, Ms. Grayson." The assistant handed her a file. "It seems Miss Ellis has quite a few unpaid medical bills from her father's final illness. She's been making minimum payments for years." "Perfect," Victoria purred. "And the other matter?" "One of her stories was submitted to Palmer Publishing last year. They rejected it, but..." The assistant paused. "The editor said it showed promise." Victoria's eyes gleamed. "Get me a meeting with Palmer Publishing today." Across town, Monica was having the best morning of her life. She'd just finished her last shift at Joe's Diner. Eleanor had insisted on helping her focus on her writing full-time. "I can't believe you're leaving us," Betty sniffled, hugging her tight. "Who's going to tell me about all the crazy rich people drama now?" "I'll visit every day," Monica promised. "Besides, I need material for my stories." Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Check your email. Important news." Monica opened her inbox to find a message from Palmer Publishing. Her hands shook as she read it. "Dear Ms. Ellis, we're pleased to inform you that we'd like to offer you a publishing contract." "Oh my God!" Monica screamed, causing several customers to jump. "Betty, they want to publish my book," she immediately called Ethan. "Did you have anything to do with this? What kind of boyfriend would I be if I didn't brag about my girlfriend's writing to everyone I meet?" She could hear his smile through the phone. "Dinner tonight to celebrate?" "Yes, I just have to finish packing up my apartment first." Monica was finally moving in with Ethan, another big step that both thrilled and terrified her. But when Monica arrived at her apartment building, something felt off. Her door was slightly ajar. "Hello?" she called, pushing it open. Her heart stopped. The apartment had been ransacked. Her laptop was gone, along with all her unpublished stories. But worst of all, her father's old leather journal, the only thing she had left of him, was missing. Shaking, she called Ethan. "Someone broke in," she managed to say when he answered. "Everything's gone, all my stories, Dad's journal." "I'm on my way," Ethan said immediately. "Don't touch anything, I'm calling the police." Within an hour, her tiny apartment was filled with police officers and crime scene techs. Ethan held her while she gave her statement, his face growing darker with each detail. "The timing's too perfect," he muttered. "The publishing contract, and now this." "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, Monica's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Miss Ellis," a smooth voice said. "I believe I have something you want." Monica's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Let's just say I'm someone who cares about the Grayson family's reputation. If you want your father's journal back and if you don't want certain medical bills sent to collections, you'll break things off with Ethan. Today." "You can't." "I can do much worse," the voice cut her off. "You have until midnight to end things. Make it convincing. Make him believe you never loved him, or everything you care about disappears, including that publishing contract you're so excited about." The line went dead. Monica stared at her phone, feeling sick. She knew that voice. She'd heard it just weeks ago at the gala, dripping with false sweetness. Victoria. "Monica?" Ethan touched her arm. "What's wrong?" "Who was that?" Monica looked at the man she loved, knowing what she had to do to protect everything she'd worked for. Her father's last words, her chance at being a published author, her very future, all of it hung in the balance. "No one," she forced herself to smile. "Wrong number." But as Ethan helped her gather what was left of her belongings, Monica's mind raced. She had until midnight to break the heart of the only man she'd ever truly loved. Unless Monica remembered something Eleanor had said at the gala about handling people who threatened her family. Maybe it was time to learn from the master. She sent a quick text. "Mrs. Grayson, I need your help. It's about Victoria." The response came immediately. "Meet me at the house." "And Monica, call me Eleanor. We're about to go to war." The Grayson mansion was eerily quiet when Monica arrived. Eleanor waited in her private study, a room filled with leather-bound books and family photographs, including, Monica noticed, several of Victoria as a child, back when she wore hand-me-downs and had holes in her shoes. "Sit down, dear," Eleanor said, pouring 2 glasses of brandy. "Tell me exactly what my daughter has done." As Monica explained about the break-in, the phone call, and the blackmail, Eleanor's face grew harder. When Monica finished, the older woman stood and walked to an antique desk. "Victoria always was determined to erase her past," Eleanor said, opening a drawer. "She's ashamed of where we came from. Thinks if she acts rich enough, mean enough, no one will remember when she was poor little Vicky from the wrong side of town." She pulled out an old photograph album. "But she's forgotten something very important about this family." "What's that?" Eleanor's smile was razor sharp. "I keep everything. Every secret, every document, every skeleton in every closet. It's how I've protected this family for 30 years. She opened the album to show Monica a newspaper clipping. "Did you know Victoria was arrested when she was 18? Shoplifting. Richard paid to have it buried, of course, but I kept the proof." Monica leaned forward. "But why?" "Because power isn't about money, dear. It's about knowing when and how to use what you know." Eleanor closed the album. "Now, about those medical bills, they're from when Dad was sick," Monica admitted. "I've been paying them off slowly, but consider them handled," Eleanor said firmly. "No one threatens my family, and like it or Not your family now. Monica's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to cause trouble. Nonsense. Victoria needs to learn she's not as powerful as she thinks. Eleanor picked up her phone. First, we'll need to call my lawyer about those medical bills. Then we'll deal with Palmer Publishing. I suspect we'll find Victoria's fingers in that. And finally, her eyes glittered, we'll get your father's journal back. How? By giving Victoria exactly what she wants, a chance to humiliate you publicly. Eleanor's smile grew wider. At the annual Grayson Technologies charity auction. Next week. Just then, Monica's phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Miss you. Can't wait to have you home tonight. Her heart clenched. I hate lying to him, she whispered. Sometimes we must protect the ones we love by keeping secrets, Eleanor said gently. Just for a little while. The next few days were torture. Monica moved in with Ethan as planned, but every loving gesture, every kiss felt tainted by her secret. Victoria's deadline had passed, but Eleanor had convinced her to play along, to pretend she was backing down. Let her think she's winning, Eleanor advised. Victoria's always been her own worst enemy when she gets overconfident. The night before the charity auction, Monica lay awake in Ethan's arms, listening to his steady breathing. On his bedside table sat a small velvet box she wasn't supposed to know about. She'd found it while unpacking, hidden in his sock drawer. He was planning to propose at the auction, and Victoria knew it. It's perfect, Victoria had gloated to her assistant in a phone call Eleanor's private investigator had recorded. When she humiliates herself in front of everyone, he'll finally see she's nothing but a gold digger. And if she tries to fight back, she'd laughed. Well, Daddy's old journal might just have a tragic accident. A tear slid down Monica's cheek. Somewhere in the city, her father's last words to her were sitting in a safe, being used as ammunition. Against her love for Ethan. You're thinking too loud, Ethan mumbled sleepily, pulling her closer. Just nervous about tomorrow, she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. The auction, you'll be amazing. He kissed her shoulder. I have a surprise planned. Monica's heart ached. Ethan, you know I love you, right? No matter what happens. He propped himself up on an elbow, suddenly alert. What's wrong? Nothing, she forced a smile. Everything's perfect. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, Monica couldn't help but wonder if this would be their last night together. Tomorrow, at the auction, either Victoria would destroy her relationship with Ethan, or Eleanor's plan would destroy Victoria's reputation forever. And Monica still didn't know which outcome terrified her more. Across town in her penthouse office, Victoria opened her wall safe and took out a worn leather journal. She ran her fingers over the faded cover, smiling as she imagined Monica's face when everything fell apart. But she never noticed the tiny camera Eleanor's people had installed weeks ago, recording every move. Nor did she see the familiar figure watching her building from a car across the street, the same figure who had taught a young Victoria how to survive in a world that looked down on poor girls with big dreams. Eleanor Grayson took a sip of her coffee and smiled. Oh, Victoria, she murmured, you should have remembered who taught you how to play this game. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and wealthy donors. Monica stood in the ladies' room smoothing down her red designer gown, another gift from Eleanor. Remember the plan, Eleanor's voice came through Monica's earpiece. They'd borrowed it from Eleanor's private security team. Victoria will make her move during the live auction. That's when we strike. Monica's hands shook as she reapplied her lipstick. What if something goes wrong? Trust your future mother-in-law, Eleanor chuckled. Speaking of which, my son is looking for you, probably getting anxious about that ring in his pocket. Monica's heart twisted. She hadn't told Eleanor about finding the engagement ring. Just like she hadn't told her how many times she'd nearly confessed everything to Ethan this past week. She found him by the auction displays, looking handsome in his tuxedo. His face lit up when he saw her. There you are, he said, kissing her cheek. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind about coming. Never, Monica smiled, trying to hide her nerves, though your sister's been staring daggers at me all night. Indeed, Victoria stood across the room in a designer black dress, watching them like a hawk. She was clutching a large envelope that Monica knew contained pages from her father's journal. Ignore her, Ethan said. Tonight's about us. If he only knew how true that was. The auction began, and Monica's anxiety grew with each item. She watched, Victoria whispering with the auction coordinator, sliding something into his hand. "Next up," the coordinator announced, "a special surprise item. We have here some interesting documents about one of our guests." Monica's heart stopped. This was it. Victoria was going to reveal the medical bills, humiliate her in front of everyone. But before the coordinator could continue, Eleanor's voice rang out. "Actually, I have an announcement to make first." All eyes turned to Eleanor Grayson as she took the stage, commanding attention as only she could. "Tonight is about family," Eleanor began. "And sometimes family needs tough love." She gestured to her assistant, who started a video projection on the ballroom's giant screen. Victoria's face went white as security footage appeared, showing her breaking into Monica's apartment. Another clip showed her removing the journal from a safe. "My daughter seems to have forgotten where she came from," Eleanor continued. "So let me remind everyone of a story about a poor girl from the wrong side of town who once wore second-hand clothes and stole to survive." "Mother, don't," Victoria pleaded, but Eleanor was unstoppable. More images appeared. Young Victoria in shabby clothes, newspaper clippings about her arrest, proof of her schemes to sabotage Monica. "Stop this," Victoria screamed. She pulled out the journal pages, ready to retaliate. That's when Monica made her move. While everyone was distracted by the screen, she'd circled behind Victoria. In one swift motion, she snatched the pages from Victoria's hands. "Looking for these?" Monica's voice was stronger than she felt. "I believe they belong to me." The room erupted in chaos. Victoria lunged for the papers, but Eleanor's security team stepped in. Cameras flashed as society photographers captured every moment. "You think you've won?" Victoria spat at Monica. "You're still nothing but a waitress playing dress-up." "No," Ethan's voice cut through the commotion. He was standing on stage now, looking devastated. "She's the woman I love. The woman you tried to destroy." He turned to Monica, pain in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Monica clutched her father's journal pages, tears falling. "I wanted to protect you. I thought I could handle it myself." "We handle things together," Ethan said firmly. He reached for the ring box in his pocket. "That's what I was going to ask you tonight, to handle everything together, forever." Victoria made a disgusted sound. "You can't be serious." "That's enough," Eleanor commanded. "Victoria, you have a choice. Apologize to Monica and accept her place in this family, or find yourself cut off from both your trust fund and your position at the company." The room held its breath as Victoria stood frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She looked around wildly, seeing no allies in the crowd of shocked faces. "I won't." "Oh yes, you will," Eleanor said calmly. "Because deep down you're still that scared little girl who needed her family, and family forgives." She turned to Monica. "If Monica is willing?" All eyes turned to Monica, who still held her father's precious journal pages. She thought about what her dad would say, about the kind of person she wanted to be. "I'm willing to try," she said softly. "If Victoria is." Victoria's perfect makeup was streaked with tears. For a moment, Monica saw through the designer clothes and polished facade to the wounded woman beneath. Victoria's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I was afraid of losing my place, of being reminded of who I used to be." "Then maybe it's time to remember that girl," Eleanor suggested. "She survived. She fought. She became strong." She looked between her children. "Maybe it's time this family remembered where we really came from." In the silence that followed, Ethan took Monica's hand and led her to the center of the room. Around them, cameras flashed and whispers flew, but all Monica could see was the love in his eyes. "I had a whole speech planned," he said, getting down on one knee. "But I think we've had enough drama tonight, so I'll just ask, Monica Ellis, will you marry me?" Monica looked at Eleanor, who was beaming with pride, at Victoria, who gave a tiny, tearful nod, at the crowd of society people who had once intimidated her, but now seemed so unimportant. Finally, she looked at Ethan, the man who had loved her from the moment she sat at the wrong table. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. As Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and the room erupted in applause, Monica felt Eleanor's hand on her shoulder. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said. All its wonderful, messy, complicated parts. And Monica realized that sometimes the greatest love stories weren't just about two people finding each other. Sometimes they were about finding your place in a family, even one as dramatic as the Graysons. The morning after the auction, every society page in the city blazed with headlines about the Grayson family drama. Monica sat in Ethan's penthouse kitchen, scrolling through her phone in disbelief. Grayson. Family scandal, secret past revealed. Cinderella story turns soap opera. Heiress attempts to sabotage brother's romance. Grayson matriarch exposes daughter's schemes at charity event. "Stop reading those," Ethan said, taking her phone away and replacing it with a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling?" Monica looked down at the enormous diamond ring on her finger. "Like I'm living in a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. I'm not sure which yet." "Having second thoughts?" Ethan asked quietly. "About marrying you?" "Never." Monica stood and wrapped her arms around him. "About dealing with your sister for the rest of my life? Maybe a few." As if on cue, the elevator dinged. Victoria walked in, looking nothing like her usual polished self. Her eyes were red from crying and she was wearing jeans, something Monica had never seen before. "I brought breakfast," Victoria said awkwardly, holding up a bag from Joe's diner. "Betty helped me pick out your favorite." Monica and Ethan exchanged shocked looks. "Victoria Grayson bringing diner takeout?" Mother suggested I try to remember what it was like before all this. Victoria gestured vaguely at her designer purse and expensive jewelry. "Betty remembered me from when I used to wait tables there in high school. You worked at Joe's?" Monica couldn't hide her surprise. Victoria nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Mother couldn't afford much after father died. I worked there for 2 years before Ethan's father, married her and changed everything." She began unpacking the food with shaking hands. "I was so afraid of going back to that life, of being that scared poor girl again. When I saw you with Ethan, it was like looking in a mirror from 20 years ago. And I panicked." "So you tried to destroy her?" Ethan's voice was hard. "Ethan," Monica touched his arm. "Let her talk." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, I know it's not enough, but I am. Mother was right. I forgot who I really am, who we all are." She pulled something else from her bag. "I brought this too." It was Monica's father's journal, completely intact. "I never actually tore any pages out," Victoria admitted. "I couldn't bring myself to destroy something so precious. I just made copies to scare you." Monica hugged the journal to her chest, overwhelmed with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. An uncomfortable silence fell as they began eating their diner breakfast. Finally, Victoria spoke again. "So, I heard Palmer Publishing is still planning to publish your book?" Monica nodded. "Eleanor, your mother, made sure the contract stayed valid. It's being released next spring." "I'd like to read it," Victoria said softly, "if that's okay." Before Monica could respond, Eleanor swept into the penthouse, bringing her usual whirlwind of energy. "Good, you're all here," she announced. "We have a wedding to plan, and about 1,000 reporters to deal with." She paused, taking in the scene, the diner food, Victoria's casual clothes, the tentative peace between the women. Well, maybe there's hope for this family yet." "Mother," Victoria started, but Eleanor held up a hand. "Later, dear. Right now we need to focus on damage control. The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss yesterday's events." Ethan tensed. "They can't do anything. I own controlling shares." "True," Eleanor smiled slyly. "But they might be surprised to learn that I've convinced your sister to vote her shares with you from now on. Isn't that right, Victoria?" Victoria nodded. "It's time I started acting like part of this family instead of its biggest threat." "And," Eleanor continued, "they might be interested to know that Monica's book will be published under the Palmer Grayson Publishing banner, our newest subsidiary, which Victoria will be running." Everyone stared at her. "What?" Monica gasped. "You bought a publishing company?" "Consider it an engagement present," Eleanor said breezily. And a fresh start for Victoria. After all, who better to run a company dedicated to new voices than someone who remembers what it's like to need one? Victoria's eyes widened. Mother, I don't know anything about publishing. You'll learn, just like you learned everything else. Eleanor's voice softened. It's time to stop hiding from your past, dear. Use it to help others instead. Monica watched in amazement as Victoria's face transformed. For the first time, she saw a glimmer of the woman she could be. Might have been all along if fear hadn't twisted her so badly. I'd like that, Victoria said quietly. Ethan squeezed Monica's hand. Looks like you're stuck with all of us now. Speaking of being stuck, Eleanor pulled out her tablet. We need to discuss wedding venues. I'm thinking the plaza. Actually, Monica interrupted. I was hoping we could have it at Joe's diner. The diner? Eleanor blinked. Where else? Monica smiled. It's where I spent 10 years dreaming of being a writer. It's where Victoria started her journey. And it's where Betty's been serving coffee to lonely dreamers for 30 years. She looked at Ethan. What do you think? I think it's perfect, he said, kissing her softly. Just like you. Well, Eleanor sighed dramatically. I suppose I can. Work with that. Victoria, dear, you'll help me transform that little diner into something magical. Victoria looked at Monica, a real smile finally breaking through. Only if the bride approves all our plans. As the Grayson women began debating color schemes and table arrangements, Monica leaned back in her chair, taking it all in. 6 months ago, she'd been a waitress with a drawer full of rejection letters and a heart full of dreams. Now she was a soon-to-be published author, engaged to a man who loved her completely, and part of a family that was crazy and complicated, and finally learning to heal. Penny for your thoughts? Ethan whispered. Just thinking about fairy tales, Monica replied, and how the best ones aren't about everything being perfect. They're about finding the beauty in what's real. Even when what's real includes a reformed evil sister and a meddling fairy godmother of a mother. Especially then. Monica laughed as Eleanor and Victoria argued about whether peonies were too cliché for a diner wedding. I wouldn't have it any other way. 2 weeks before the wedding, Joe's diner was barely recognizable. Eleanor and Victoria had worked miracles, transforming the humble restaurant into a glittering wonderland, while somehow keeping its heart intact. We kept the original counter, Victoria explained proudly, showing Monica the renovations. But we had it refinished in marble, and look, she pointed to the walls now covered in framed black and white photographs. Mother found pictures from when the diner first opened in 1962. Monica studied one particular photo, a young waitress with Victoria's smile, wearing a uniform just like the one Monica had worn for years. Is that you? Victoria nodded. My first day on the job, I was terrified. She touched the frame gently. Mother was right. Running from our past doesn't make us stronger. Their moment was interrupted by Betty bursting through the door, waving a newspaper. Monica, have you seen this? Monica's stomach dropped as she read the headline. Grayson heir's fiancé exposed. The dark truth behind the fairy tale. The article was brutal. Someone had leaked details about her father's gambling debts, suggesting she'd hidden them from Ethan. There were quotes from anonymous sources claiming she'd trapped him, that she was after his money. It gets worse, Betty said grimly. Channel. Kate is running a whole expose tonight. They interviewed your mother. Monica felt the room spin. My mother? But she left when I was 3. I haven't seen her in 25 years. Victoria's face hardened. Who leaked this? James Bradford. Eleanor's voice came from the doorway. She looked angrier than Monica had ever seen her. He's still bitter about being humiliated at the auction, and now he's found your mother and convinced her to talk. What do we do? Monica whispered. We fight back, Victoria said firmly. Mother, call the station. Use every contact you have. I'll handle the newspaper. No, Monica said suddenly. Let them air it. Everyone stared at her. Monica, Eleanor started, but Monica cut her off. My whole life, I've wondered about my mother, why she left, what I did wrong. She straightened her shoulders. Let her talk. Let everyone hear what she has to say. I'm not ashamed of my past anymore. Victoria touched her arm. Are you sure? The press can be cruel. I'm sure. Monica looked around at the diner, at the photos showing generations of dreamers who'd passed through its doors. This place taught me something. Every story matters, even the painful ones. That night, the Graysons gathered in Ethan's penthouse to watch the exposé. Monica's mother, Linda, appeared on screen looking polished and practiced, nothing like the faded memory Monica carried. Of course she's after his money, Linda said smoothly. Look at her background, a waitress, living paycheck to paycheck, and now suddenly she's marrying one of the richest men in the city. Turn it off, Ethan growled, but Monica shook her head. Wait. The reporter turned to Linda. You left when Monica was 3 years old. Why? I had dreams, Linda shrugged. I couldn't be tied down to a husband who gambled away every penny and a child who needed constant attention. Monica felt Ethan's hand tighten around hers. Have you had any contact with your daughter since then? No, Linda admitted, but I've followed her story in the papers. It's like watching a movie, the poor little waitress who caught herself a billionaire. The reporter's voice sharpened. Did you ever send money to help with your ex-husband's medical bills? Linda shifted uncomfortably. Well, no, but were you aware that your daughter worked 3 jobs to pay those bills? That she spent every night for 2 years reading to her dying father in the hospital? That's not... The camera pulled back to reveal Betty sitting next to the reporter. I watched that girl grow up, Betty said fiercely. Watched her work her fingers to the bone taking care of the father you abandoned. Watched her write stories on her breaks, never giving up on her dreams. And now you want to tear her down? The exposé continued, but it wasn't the hit piece Bradford had planned. Instead, it became a story of determination, of a daughter's love, of a young woman who'd overcome abandonment to build her own success. When it was over, Monica was crying, but they were healing tears. I needed to see her, she said softly. To know that leaving was her choice, her weakness, not mine. Eleanor hugged her tight. You are worth 1,000 of her, my dear. Victoria wiped her own eyes. Well, Bradford's plan certainly backfired. Social media is exploding with support for you. Team Monica is trending. Monica laughed through her tears. Really? Really, Ethan. Confirmed, showing her his phone. People love a real Cinderella story, especially one where Cinderella saved herself long before the prince came along. There was a knock at the door. Betty entered carrying a box. Found these while we were cleaning out the diner's old storage room, she said, handing it to Monica. Inside were dozens of notebooks, filled with stories Monica had written over the years during her breaks. Stories about hope, about dreams, about never giving up. My first novels, she whispered. Your mother was wrong about one thing, Betty said firmly. Your story isn't a movie. It's better. It's real. Victoria picked up one of the notebooks. We should publish these too. Show everyone. Where you started? A waitress with a dream, Eleanor mused. Just like all of us once were. Monica looked around at her chosen family. The man who loved her, the sister who'd learned to accept her, the mother figure who'd championed her, and the friend who'd believed in her all along. No, she said softly. Not just a waitress with a dream anymore. A woman who found her happy ending and made sure she deserved it. As they gathered around the table, sharing memories and planning the wedding's final details, Monica realized something profound. Her mother's rejection had led her here to this family, to this love. Sometimes the hardest chapters of our story lead us exactly where we need to be. In 2 weeks, she would marry Ethan in the diner where she'd spent 10 years dreaming, and now she knew. It hadn't been just dreams keeping her going all those years. It had been hope. The same hope that had brought a young Victoria through those same diner doors. The same hope that had given Eleanor the courage to marry Richard Grayson, despite society's judgment. The same hope that told her finally that she wasn't just somebody's daughter, somebody's waitress, or somebody's fiancée. She was Monica Ellis, soon to be Monica Grayson. And her story was just beginning. On the morning of the wedding, Joe's diner glowed like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, but the old neon sign still buzzed cheerfully in the window. White roses and twinkling lights transformed the space, but the coffee still perked in the same old machine, filling the air with its familiar comfort. Perfect, Eleanor declared, supervising the final preparations. "Elegant but authentic, just like our bride." Monica stood in Betty's office, now converted into a bridal suite, staring at her reflection. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of silk and lace, but she'd insisted on wearing her old waitress nameplate pinned inside as her something old. "You look beautiful, honey," Betty said, adjusting Monica's veil. "Your father would be so proud." Victoria poked her head in. "Everyone's ready, and Monica, someone's here to see you." Monica turned to find James Bradford in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "Miss Ellis," he said formally, "I came to apologize. What I did, trying to hurt you through your mother, it was unforgivable." "Why did you do it?" Monica asked quietly. Bradford's shoulders slumped. "Because you reminded me of my own daughter. She married a man I didn't approve of, and I lost her. When I saw you changing the Graysons, becoming part of their world, it brought back all my bitterness." "Have you tried talking to your daughter?" "Not in 5 years." Monica touched the worn leather journal on the dressing table, her father's last gift. "Life's too short for regrets, Mr. Bradford. Call her." Bradford's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered, and hurried away. "That was kind of you," Victoria said softly. "That's who she is," came Eleanor's voice. "That's why she belongs in this family." The ceremony was set to begin in 15 minutes when Betty rushed in, flustered. "The coffee machine's broken down. We can't have a diner wedding without coffee. I'll fix it," Monica said immediately, starting to stand. "In your wedding dress." Victoria looked horrified. "Absolutely not. I'll do it." Everyone stared as Victoria Grayson, wearing a designer bridesmaid dress, knelt by the ancient coffee machine. "What?" she smirked. "You think I forgot everything I learned here?" 5 minutes later, the machine was humming happily, and Victoria's dress was stained with coffee grounds. "Worth it," she declared, hugging Monica carefully to avoid transferring the stains. The wedding march began, not from an organ, but from the old jukebox playing Elvis's "Can't Help Falling in Love." Monica walked down an aisle lined with diner, booths where society's elite sat shoulder to shoulder with her regular customers from the diner. She saw Bradford in the back, talking quietly on his phone, tears streaming down his face as he reconnected with his daughter. And there was Ethan, waiting for her by the counter, where she'd served countless cups of coffee while dreaming of a love like this. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today in this unique and special place." The ceremony was simple and perfect. They exchanged vows under the glow of neon signs, shared their first kiss as husband and wife, while the coffee machine whistled its approval. During the reception, Eleanor clinked her glass for attention. "When I first met Monica," she said, "I recognized something in her. The same fire I had as a young receptionist, the same determination Victoria showed waiting tables here. The Grayson family wasn't built on money. It was built on dreams, on hard work, on never forgetting where we came from." She raised her glass. "To Monica and Ethan, and to Joe's Diner, where dreamers have always found their way home." As the celebration continued, Monica and Ethan slipped into their old booth, the one where she'd taken her breaks, writing stories in her notebook. "Happy?" Ethan asked, kissing her hand. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Monica watched Victoria, teaching Eleanor how to work the milkshake machine, both of them laughing as they made a mess. "Look at your sister now." "Our sister," Ethan corrected. "Just like that's our mother over there wearing a Joe's Diner apron over her designer dress." "And this is our place," Monica said softly, "where a scared teenage Victoria found her strength. Where I wrote my first stories, where you found me." "Actually," Ethan grinned, "you found me at the wrong table in the right restaurant. Best mistake I ever made." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the cleanup crew was finishing up, Monica stood behind the counter one last time. She poured coffee into a cup, enjoying the familiar motion. "Old habits?" Betty asked, joining her. "Good memories," Monica corrected. "And new beginnings." She looked around at her family. Eleanor and Victoria arguing about whether the diner's new publishing corner should stock literary fiction or romance novels. Ethan reviewing the new menu that combined comfort food with gourmet touches. Bradford showing everyone pictures of his grandchildren on his phone. The diner had changed, just like they all had. But its heart remained the same, a place where anyone could come to dream, to start over, to find their way home. Monica touched her father's journal, now displayed proudly in a case on the wall alongside her first published novel. His last written words caught the light. "Dreams don't have deadlines, sweetheart, and love doesn't care about bank accounts." "Ready to go, Mrs. Grayson?" Ethan asked, holding out his hand. Monica smiled, taking one last look at the diner that had given her everything. Career, a family, a love story." "Ready," she said, taking his hand. "But let's come back for breakfast tomorrow. I hear they've got the best coffee in town." "And the best stories," Ethan added, pulling her close. As they stepped out into the night, the diner's neon sign glowed behind them, a beacon for all the dreamers yet to come. Monica had finally found her happy ending, not in a fairy tale castle, but in a humble diner where love was always the special of the day. The end.